Newer Pokémon games are no stranger to questionable decisions, but the decision to remove hidden machines, or HMs, is one that's met with as close to unanimous approval as something with as big a fanbase as Pokémon can possibly get. HMs haven't appeared in a mainline Pokémon game since Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Even Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, remakes of the games with the highest number of HMs, replaced them with a Pokechap. But while it's great to not have to teach HMs to your Pokémon anymore, it also has its downsides that people aren't always aware of. Wait, there are downsides? That implies that there's something good about HMs to begin with. Well, before we can talk about the under-recognized benefits of HMs, it's important to understand what, specifically, makes them unpleasant. Having a move on your Pokémon that you can't easily forget is the big one. This is especially bad when the move is something like Rock Smash or Flash, moves so unhelpful that you'd generally never teach them to a Pokémon if they weren't required. But it's also important to note that for every Rock Smash, Flash, and Whirlpool, there's a Surf, Waterfall, and even Fly. Surf has always been one of the best Water-type moves, with 90 to 95 base power and a fantastic 100 accuracy. Even before Gen 4's physical special split, Waterfall was a respectable alternative, with 100 accuracy once again and 80 base power. Starting in Gen 4, however, it really got its chance to shine as a physical alternative to the specially hitting Surf. It's hardly harmful to teach Surf or Waterfall to members of your team. Fly may seem a bit harder to defend, with 95 accuracy and needing one turn to prepare, but the enemy AI usually isn't smart enough to try to avoid your Pokémon when they use it, so the respectable 70 base power, which got boosted to a massive 90 starting in Gen 4, is actually a decent option over many other flying-type attacks. For some reason, flying-type attacks just aren't consistently good. The most common ones include the 35 power Peck, 40 power Gust, which was a normal type move in Gen 1, 60 power Wing Attack, 60 power Aerial Ace, and the 60 power and 95 accuracy Air Cutter. Most flying type moves simply don't match Fly in power without some sort of drawback, such as Brave Bird's recoil or Hurricane's lower accuracy outside of rain. Sky Attack, Bounce, Sky Drop, and even Beak Blast also require some sort of charging. Besides legendary Pokemon signature moves, your best bet outside of Fly is really just Drill Peck. This 80 base power, 100 accuracy move with no secondary effects can only be learned by a measly 11 evolutionary lines normally, and only 2 more gain access to it through breeding. Just compare that to Flamethrower. It has the same accuracy, 10 more base power, a 10% chance to leave a burn, and can be learned by way more Pokemon through a combination of leveling up, move tutors, and TMs. Now, whatever the reason for the flying type's lack of good moves, and whatever your feelings on Fly may be, it's true that some gens are definitely better at having more battle-appropriate HMs than others. The gens with 8 HMs tend to have a lot of stinkers, like Defog and Rock Climb. But the games that have fewer HMs, like those in Unova and Kalos, generally feel a lot less offensive because the HMs they tend to drop are the bad ones. It's okay that your Pokemon can't forget moves like Surf, Waterfall, and even Fly when there's not much worth replacing them with. But it's not just the fact that your Pokemon can't forget HMs that makes them disliked in most games. Another major frustration arising from HMs is how they actually impede your progression. Want to go north of Mauville City? You need HM Rock Smash. Want to go south of Olivine City? You need HM Surf. And don't even get me started on Mount Coronet. Sun and Moon's Ride Pokemon may have alleviated the need to teach HMs to your party Pokemon, but they still serve the same purpose. You can't enter 10 Carrot Hill until you get Tauros. You can't cross any water until you get Lapras, and etc. And this is on top of all the other roadblocks Alola loves to throw your way. While it's great to not have to teach HMs to your Pokemon anymore, I don't think having Ride Pokemon at all times is the best alternative. When you always have every HM equivalent at your disposal, you really have no reason not to explore when you see that a ride Pokemon can be used. I'll admit that this actually isn't innately bad in the traditional linear Pokemon games. Exploration in these games is important, absolutely, but the ability to explore doesn't need to have significant stakes the way, say, an open-world game should have. Instead, the bigger problem of HMs, or their equivalents, always being at your disposal, is how that contributes to the feeling that more recent Pokemon games simply give players everything without them needing to work for it. Before, when you had to teach your Pokemon HMs, it felt like your world was opening up thanks to a combination of your teammates' abilities and your own decisions. If you want to get past a certain obstacle, you need to figure out what Pokemon can actually overcome it, catch it if you don't have it already, then teach it the right moves to do so. This only somewhat exists with ride Pokemon because while you did earn the ride Pokemon itself, there's absolutely no problem solving or risk versus reward factor to prevent you from just hopping onto Mudsdale every time you see rocky ground, or onto Lapras every time you see water. It makes exploration feel less of an exciting option and more of an obligation. It doesn't feel rewarding when you find hidden trainers to battle or rare items, even those that are especially valuable. It just feels like another Tuesday. Nothing is really hidden or secret. There is no going off the beaten path, because all paths are beaten when they're always easily accessible. Now, this absolutely does get annoying when combined with HMs that are required for progression, like those in Gens 1 through 4 and 6. HMs should feel like you're giving up a move slot for the sake of adding to your exploration options, not like you have to give up more and more move slots as the game goes on just to get by. This is actually the biggest reason why I like Black and White's HMs so much. They're never required for progression. They're purely for exploration rather than glorified roadblocks like other gens HMs and even ride Pokemon. There is a tree that needs to be cut down in the Dream Yard, but like I discuss in my Elemental Monkeys video, that's part of a tutorial that teaches players that HMs can be used on the overworld at all. Just teach your newfound monkey cut and be on your way. Black 2 and White 2 are a little awkward in that they require some HMs to get past Victory Road, but they're still leagues better than most other Pokemon games in this regard. Players who genuinely want to explore have the option to do so at their own leisure, and at the expense of some of their Pokemon's move slots. If you don't want to have to backtrack for goodies, you'll want to teach your Pokemon HMs earlier. If you don't mind backtracking, just come back later with Pokemon that know some HMs. As an added bonus, pretty much all of Gen 5's HMs are good, if not great, for battle. Dive isn't as easy a sell as Surf or Waterfall, but it's both post-game exclusive and for an area that has no battles. The cost of teaching one of your Pokemon Dive is mitigated by how you don't need a battle-ready party for that area, making it truly just for exploration. There's also a tiny element to Gen 5's HMs that I think is really neat and underappreciated. In Gen 5, there are no badge requirements for using any of the HMs. This may seem like it only matters for Strength and Waterfall because the other HMs are only obtained during story segments that are connected to earning certain badges anyways. However, if you somehow got a Pokemon with an HM through a trade, you still could use that HM right away. It's not very easy to take advantage of this, but if you do, you could in fact get really cool rewards like the Larvesta egg and other goodies earlier than you're meant to. Since this wasn't changed in Black 2 and White 2, it was likely intentional, and can be seen as rewarding player creativity and collaboration. Ride Pokemon simply can't add any creativity or player expression during gameplay because they're not even your Pokemon. HMs, when they're not impeding your progress, are fun because you're exploring with your Pokemon. Whether you got them in a trade or found them in the wild, it's your team that's helping you get through the game, not some rental Pokemon that you may not even want. A big part of the Pokemon series appeal is getting to use the Pokemon of your choice after all. Sure, there were plenty of people hyped that Charizard was Sun and Moon's fly Pokemon, even though it can't normally be found in Alola, so why wasn't the fly Pokemon 2 canon? But Gen 5 hate was still pretty common back when Sun and Moon were new, so there were just as many people upset that it was Stoutland and not another Gen 1 Pokemon for item finding. As much as I despise the choice of Charizard as the fly Pokemon in Sun and Moon, I actually feel that Fly is the only HM that should always be accessible, either as a ride Pokemon or via fast travel like in Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet. Unlike other HMs, Fly isn't an exploration tool, it's a convenience tool, so it should similarly be convenient to use. Black and White gets around this by making the lack of fast travel relevant to the story, but that's a detail I'll go over in another video. For now, the important thing to realize is that even when an HM should have been more easily accessible, Black and White tie it into their story, giving it a reason to be something that must be taught to one of your own Pokémon. HMs are at their best when they're purely for optional exploration like in Gen 5. Players are properly rewarded for sacrificing their Pokémon's move slots and for taking the time to really scour their surroundings. Finding hidden items feels satisfying when they're actually hidden behind something that you need to go out of your way to overcome. And it's especially great to get to do that with your own team of Pokémon. It's even better when HMs don't stop you from progressing the game proper, so you can ignore extra exploration if you so choose. Unfortunately, Gen 5 is the only time HMs are like this, so I can't, nor do I want to, defend HMs across all the other generations. But that's just one of many ways Gen 5 is so special. It takes a classic mechanic that was normally more frustrating than fun and actually removed its negatives, elevating it to a feature that still holds up to this day, even though contemporary games would rather do away with HMs altogether.